Hey, good morning. Welcome to day 12 of our 21-day January Kickstarter on faith. This week we've been considering how do we actually outwork our faith in our lives on a practical level on this adventure of faith. What does it mean to live by faith, to walk by faith? And one of the things we've really honed in on or looked at is that walking by faith comes down to how we hear and see and respond, how we hear the voice of God in our lives, how we see from God's perspective and focus on Him, and how do we actually respond with our hearts in obedience to Him. And Jesus often used this strange phrase. He said, "He who has ears to hear, let him hear." And I think it was an invitation for us not just to listen, but actually to tune in, to hear and to understand what He's saying to us. And it requires a certain kind of attitude of heart, a humble heart, a soft heart, an approach that's willing to listen and obey and to search out further for understanding. And we say this often in the vineyard and across the church, but the voice of God in your life is the most important thing on this faith journey. Our ability to hear and respond to what He's saying in our lives is just so fundamental and crucially important to us. And we won't get very far without having a practice of listening and responding to the voice of God in our lives. And God speaks through so many different ways. He primarily uses the Bible just to speak to us and to open up to us and help us understand His character and His nature and what He's saying to us and the story that we're part of. But He also speaks in many other creative ways through His Spirit. And walking by faith in our lives requires us intentionally to tune in and respond to God's voice. At the beginning of lockdown, I remember finding myself, and maybe you find yourself in many moments like this, feeling just in a moment anxious and frustrated with what was going on, finding it difficult in that moment really to hear the voice of God towards me. It felt a little bit like my ears were sort of muffled and my eyes, it was foggy, and I was struggling to see and hear what God wanted to say. And one morning I remember I was kind of trying to talk to God about this, and He began to show me a picture which just cut right to the heart of the issue of why I was struggling to see and to hear. And He showed me a picture of a horse, a vision of a horse, and I know that's strange, but bear with me. And it was being led by a set of reins or a bit and a bridle in his mouth, like you might imagine a horse being led along. And in the vision, I knew that I was the horse, and what happened was I began to lie down on the grass. I was tired and exhausted, and I was unwilling to move. And in the picture, I imagined that God, who I thought was leading me, was wanting to pull on the reins and drag me along and tug me back into action so I could walk again in His way. And then I heard this still small voice, just a light upon my mind, which I've learned is the Lord, is God, and it just said this. He just said this: the reins aren't me, Ben. It's not me that's leading you. And my curiosity picked up, thinking, what are you trying to say? What do you mean? And God began to show me a whole set of things in my life that were acting like reins, leading me and tugging me in different directions, and ultimately exhausting me because they weren't Him. And He began to help show some of those areas, and expectation of others maybe, or the demands placed on my life, or the religious duties that I felt like I was required to follow, or fears and so on. And then that still small voice came again and just said, Ben, I don't want to lead you by a set of reins and tug you along. I want to lead you by my whisper. And it opened up this whole beautiful conversation with God about what that means in my life. And I want to invite you to kind of explore what that looks like for you. But I want to read you a scripture that God took me to at the same time in Psalm 32, verses 8 to 9. It says this: I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you with my eye upon you. Be not like the horse or the mule without understanding, which must be curbed with a bit and bridle, or it will not stay near you. And it was though God saying, look, I don't want to control you with a bit and a bridle. That's for someone without understanding. I want you to be led by my whisper. I realized it's easier, especially in chaotic moments, to be led by a set of reins, But actually, God's invitation is much more beautiful than that. And Jesus' desire is that He would lead us by His Spirit, by the still small voice, by His whisper. And what I want to invite you this morning to do, or wherever you're listening to this, is just to set aside a moment sometime today And maybe use this picture, if it's helpful, to let God begin to speak to you about this very thing. What are the things in your life that act like reins, like a bit in a bridle, tugging you in a particular direction, or pulling you this way and that, or driving you forward, but actually they're not bringing life to you, and they're not actually creating life in you, they're exhausting you. They're not leading to the way of Jesus. And what would it look like for you to lay those reins down? And what would it look like for you to begin to respond to the invitation of Jesus to tune into his whisper and what he might be saying to you in this moment? You know, he desires deeply to lead you and I, but not by coercion. He wants to do that by his faithful, loving, and powerful voice. Would you let him do that today? Why not find space to tune in to his whisper and to lay down some of the reins in your life and begin to experience the life that God has for you on this journey and adventure of faith? See you later.